Hi everybody, Adrian Plass here.
Yeah, and Bridget. Hello.
Number 65 in Sounding the Shallows. We seem to have been in the shallows an awful long time, don't we?
We do. Yeah, it's not a great place to be, really, is it?
It's shallow.
I don't know what it is. I think it's more turbulent than shallow, really.
The news and everything and our heads are still full of Afghanistan, aren't they?
They are. I was trying to think, Adrian. We've seen so many bits of film and pictures and all the rest of it. And I was thinking, there's two things that kind of are prominent in my mind just at the moment. And in a way they contrast. One is that strange, blurry green image of the very last US commander, I think he is, leaving Afghanistan.
Yeah.
But the other was the fact that there was a baby born on the plane, on one of the planes, bringing people to safety and arriving in the UK, a new baby and a new life.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah, absolutely. And that contrast, I think, is the way, it's certainly the way I'm feeling at the moment. I don't know about you.
I think it's the way a lot of people are feeling, and actually, especially in the church, actually, to be honest, there was a very passionate few moments the other day in the church where the leader of our church was talking about the need to lament, to be really feeling for pain in people,
To be heartbroken.
yeah, and not to be finding ways to say we praise God anyway. I mean, there might be some sort of argument for that, but just at the moment, when the world is like a field hospital, is not the time for that. And I think also more broadly, and looking back over this year and a half, and all the things that have happened, all the deaths and the having the strange having the business of people perhaps thinking we do die after all. We die. People die, and we know that. But the reality of it thrusting its face at you again and again and again and again.
Absolutely.
It's very strange. And I think for those who have given in the Christian church, given God a role of being a sort of Jeeves, if that's not unfair, who will take your orders and sort things out for you. Perhaps there is a sense of mourning for the loss of that image of God. It's going to take a lot more sorting out than me saying that. But
it's something many people have to go through, isn't it? Many people, when things go wrong in their lives, it's kind of allowing that. Well, I suppose it's the thing. Bad things happen to good people. You know, I mean, it isn't a case of what you do, meaning you get your just punishment or reward. It does take a little bit of getting to, really. But I was thinking of the other contrast, Adrian, because we're hearing, aren't we, from a lot of people in this country and in the US, veterans, many of whom are disabled. Many were killed. Families angry, upset, bewildered, really. Was any of it any good? And we've got all that, and at the same time we've got the Paralympics, which is such a positive experience to the people in it and watching it, really.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see the dedication of people, and when you imagine or try to think about the work that has gone into preparing. I know all athletes do, but for these athletes, some of them have overcome problems about the way their bodies work that none of us can imagine if we
and
haven't
feel
been through
poorly sometimes. I mean, you know, that's the other thing, getting set back because they became ill. But what an extraordinary thing, really, to be visible and wearing the shirt and being part of something. And I think that being visible thing, there is still a level of embarrassment. I tell you what, do you remember, I know you weren't there, but do you remember me telling you about a bus journey when our son Matt was about 3? I think it was one of the most embarrassing bus journeys I ever had, really, because there we were sitting there, and Matt was a very outspoken, very small person. And there was a woman there who had one arm was normal, but the other one was just a stump with fingers.
The lady who was a victim of thalidomide.
Thalidomide.
Yeah.
And it wasn't something
remember,
that... And at that time, it was rude to sort of talk about it. And Matt, as I say, being a very outspoken, very small person, kept saying, "Mummy, what's the matter with that lady?" Shh, Matt, shh, shh, shh. "No, Mummy, look. She's only got one arm and the other arm is just a little stump with fingers." I was mortified, and I shushed him all the way to Eastbourne from Hailsham, where we lived. And when we got off the bus, she got off as well. And she said, "Please don't worry about him noticing. It's quite visible as far as I'm concerned. In fact, it was more difficult for me hearing you trying to shush him and feeling embarrassed."
Yeah.
And I've never forgotten that. When you see people visible and proud of who they are, because of everything they are, that the disability is just a thing that they're the ones who have to deal with.
Yeah. No, I do remember that action. I remember you saying how nice she was about it.
She was so nice.
And Matt benefited from that, of course, as well. Because saying, "Yeah, you are. You see, it was all right to say those things."
Yes, I think he probably did say that. Yes, I think he probably did say that. But it is a natural curiosity. We're seeing all sorts of illnesses as well as disabilities and hearing about things and trying to understand what's going on, aren't we? But we see the real stuff of people, and that's what's so great. That's what we don't get the chance always to see. Did you... I was thinking of an interview with the dad of that girl, Ellie Chalice, the swimmer.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
She got meningitis when she was very small.
Lost both legs, didn't she, below the knee?
Yeah, well, and a hand.
Yeah.
And there she is, swimming away. But what struck me was her dad said, everybody said to us, "You're going to have a terrible time bringing her up. It's going to be really hard." And he said, actually, it's been a joy from the very beginning, because she's one of the most positive, happy people he's ever known. And it just, again, it resets us, doesn't it? Puts things into balance a bit.
We knew somebody else like that, didn't we? A poet who has sadly now died from Northern Ireland, if you remember.
Oh,
who
of course.
Grew up in a she was incredibly handicapped, but so proud of her own self.
Yeah,
because,
proud in the best sense. I mean
knowing
who she was.
Her father had treated her with huge respect, and carried her around and showed her things and given her a feeling about herself that was so positive. That she carried that right through her life, and she did have very, very serious physical problems.
She did,
because she used to stay with us sometimes, didn't she? Great poet.
But I mean, one of the things they say now in the supermarkets, often outside toilets, is not all disability is visible.
That's right, yes.
And I was thinking of something that was never a disability to your mum, but your mum was really tall for a girl of her time. She was 6'1", wasn't she?
Yeah, she was.
But I always remember that her mum and dad had given her that incredible comfortableness about who she was, and so it never bothered her that she was tall. It was always just part of her. So it wasn't a disability at all, but it was something that some people would have, I don't know, found difficult at that time, but she didn't have a problem with it at all, really.
She carried the first few years of her life through a lot of difficulties.
She did.
It sustained her. Fascinating.
Did you see? I was watching this morning something that I became totally absorbed in. It's a sport called Bocca, and it's been created for people with very severe, often people with muscular sclerosis, with very, very little physical movement.
What
or
happens
energy.
in Bocca?
And well, it's a bit like bowls. You have these very lightweight leather balls, but and you throw them like you have a jack, and you have to obviously get nearest to the jack and all the rest of it. But what I suppose struck me was the skill. I know it shouldn't have struck me, but it was such a skillful game.
How far can those do those people have to throw the ball that they throw?
Well, not that far, but you have to throw it very accurately. So if your limbs don't work, you have to manoeuvre your wheelchair to get to the right angle so that the distortion in your natural limbs doesn't become a factor. And I think it was such a tiny capsule of energy and tiny amount of movement that they had control over. And yet it was like every ounce of that was going into this very skillful game. I was absorbed.
It's interesting. So not only did they have to practice the actual aiming and throwing and whatever was involved in that, but they had to think carefully about how to preserve their energy for the moment when they were going to perform or going
That's
to
right. So the person who
sport.
wasn't actually throwing was absolutely still in their chair, exactly as you're saying.
Yeah. I remember you will remember an experience going for lunch with some people, and
well, we've been to lunch with quite a lot of people over the years.
But
this has got to be a particular one.
This was quite a special one, really, because as it developed, anyway, we got there and we went to a service at the church what they were involved with, and then we went and had lunch with them. And we had a very nice lunch, chicken something or other, can't remember what exactly. And then the lady who had cooked it told us what she got for pudding, and she also had told us she had ME.
That's right, I do remember.
So she had only a limited amount of energy per day.
I seem to remember it was a tiny capsule of energy.
And she said, "I've used all the energy I've got on lunch,"
yes.
Which is a little bit took us aback a little bit. But anyway, we had a very nice first course, and then she said, "Oh, I've got a pudding." So she went and got it, and she said, "I don't know if you like this. This is upside down pineapple cake, was it?"
Yeah, it was, and we love it.
And we looked at it and we said, "Yeah, though that would be great."
Pineapple
and then
pudding, yeah.
She paused and she said, "Actually, I've got something else." She went out again, and she came back with a dish exactly the same size, and she said, "And this is an upside down pear cake." And she said, "I don't know if you like pears." And you prepared yourself for what I was going to say, which was that I love pears. I absolutely adore pears. Yeah. And she said, "Do you really like pears?" And I said, "Yes, I love pears." And she said, "That's extraordinary." And I said, "Why is that extraordinary?" And she said, "Well, yesterday I went to Tesco's and I went to get the pineapples to make the upside down pineapple cake. And then all I can say is that a voice in my head seemed to say, 'Get pears, get pears.'" So she said, I resisted it for a while, and then after a bit I couldn't resist it, so I went and got the pears, and I made the two puddings, and now I discover that you are a huge pear fan. So what we were asking ourselves, if you remember, was, is it remotely possible that on that Saturday afternoon, God was in Tesco's, was whispering in her ear, "Get pears, go on, get pears, get pears. Use your little capsule of energy to produce the best possible thing." I have no idea. The God of Isaiah and Jacob and Elijah deciding it was time to pop into the supermarket for a little while.
Well, what I loved was the pleasure that it gave you, of course, and her seeing the pleasure, but also just that understanding that although she only has that tiny amount of energy, it can be used to bring pleasure. And I think that's, I suppose we have to leave God out of the picture, maybe, to look at the Paralympics necessarily, but to see people gaining so much pleasure and so much excitement and so much, competitiveness and sometimes almost ruthlessness and pushing themselves beyond anything they could have expected of themselves, sort of reaching for gold, if you like, with everything that they have got. And that, you said about the pear pudding, nothing was wasted, everything was used. Well, you were saying about, in contrast to a lot of the negativity that we're hearing, obviously out of Afghanistan.
Well, I don't know if I'd call it negativity. It was just a very hurt response to what was happening. Of course,
understandably.
I was very struck by one ex-soldier who said the opposite. He said, my memory of it is that we went in there, and this is only one view, obviously, and he said, and we gave people a taste of how it could be. And we gave them a dream. We gave them a feeling that maybe things could change. And he said, I'm going to go on believing that the seeds we sowed then are going to grow, and that change will eventually happen there. And that reminded me of something else. My mother's mother, who I called Nana.
Oh, yeah.
Your grandson calls you Nana, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Or he will when he can talk.
Yeah. Yes.
I absolutely loved her.
I know you did.
She lived in a house in a village several miles from us. And we used to go to her house on the bus. And then we'd walk up the path and she'd call through the letterbox, who's this coming up my front path? And it was me. Well, me and my brothers. But the thing about going to her house and to that village is that they acquired a sort of Disney magic for me. Everything about it, everything about the inside of the house and the walks into the town, into the village, and the friends she had who we met sometimes, it sparkled as though it was made of precious metal. And
you only had her for a little while, didn't you?
About 4 or 5. She died when I was about 5.
Yeah.
And those 5 years of knowing her, particularly since there was a lot of conflict at home at that time, I think I carried that with me and still carry it with me through my life. The knowledge that it is possible to have that degree of contentment and enjoyment was wonderful. Yeah.
So I suppose the parallel you're making then is just that even though it appears to have been a failure, it appears to have been a waste of life and a waste of hope, that actually just maybe a lot of people have been given something that will change their lives.
I don't know what the truth of that is. All I hope and pray is that those people who put a lot of work into that and wanted change and saw it starting, I hope they are able to see that the things they did and the things that happened were not in vain. And my Nana, I'm sure, before she died, thought, I hope I've done something in my grandchildren's lives in the short time that I've known them. And she did, and I'll never lose it. And like I say, my hope and my prayer is that women and girls and people who are likely to be attacked or hurt will have a residue of that hope, and that they'll never let go of it.
Despite whatever's coming now.
Despite whatever's coming,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, goodness knows what will have happened before we speak to you next week. Last week when we spoke to you, the bomb hadn't gone off, had it? That went off in the morning. We do our recordings on Thursday evening and send them to our friend in Australia, don't we, who puts them out on Friday morning. So goodness knows what will have happened by next week.
It feels like that generally at the moment, doesn't it? The world, I mean, fires and floods and
storms.
So much stuff going on.
Yeah.
But let's just look for the things in us that are good, that we have required.
Yeah.
Like those people in the fairy tales who take a bag and old lady says, here's a stick and a pear and something. And you find out why you need them. Well, of course. Yeah. Someone gave me a pear once and I forgot I put it in my bag, and 3 days later I put my hand in my bag and found this mush in there. I remember that. I didn't eat it.
As parables go, I'm not sure that one's quite as helpful as the pear pudding,
no.
but anyway.
I hope maybe we have a little peace this week. Who knows?
Oh, gosh, that would be good.
And we'll see you next week.
Yes, bye-bye.
Bye.